You are listening to Season 2, Episode 25 of the Fly the W670 podcast. This one we're calling David Ross and the Bunt. Don't forget to listen, download, review, most importantly, subscribe to our podcast. Follow us on the socials. Fly the W670 on Twitter and Instagram, Fly the W on Facebook, or email us, flythew670@gmail.com. Crawly, today's game, Cubs-Reds, was postponed because of weather. Hope you're having a good Wednesday otherwise.
I can't complain too much. The one thing, though, I was watching the game yesterday, and as it was getting later, I was getting nervous. I thought we were going to have a really red-ass Dustin, but luckily things turned around.
Yeah, I was following on my phone. I wasn't able to watch in real time. I had the DVR fired up so I could go back and see what Hayden looked like. I was following on the app. But, yeah, let's get into it. Cubs versus the Reds. Cubs headed to the Great American Ballpark to take on the Reds for their first road trip of the season. And in the first game, Drew Smyly took the ball for the Cubs.
Yeah, Drew Smyly versus Connor Overton to open the series, and things looked good right away as Nico and Dansby started the game out with back-to-back singles. He and Happ struck out, but then Cody Bellinger, Mr. 0 for 11 in the opening series against Milwaukee, unleashes a massive belly bomb, 3-run homer, put the Cubs up 3-0. I know you had to have been loving that one, Dustin.
Absolutely, because we were giving him a little bit of the business on the show on Monday. He was my most disappointing Cub, most disappointing so far through 3 whole games, but you got to start somewhere when you got to do 20 hours of 25 live hours of radio every week.
So you're feeling good, right? 3-0 lead, no problem.
Absolutely.
Drew Smyly takes the mound, right? And first thing he does is walk the very first batter, the speedy Jonathan India, which had me banging my head on the table. Like, you just got staked to 3-0 lead.
Something we've just been talking about, right? We were just talking about, hey, you cannot walk the batters.
Right, especially after you have a 3-0 lead. You got it. Your guys got it for you. Go in there and just be aggressive. He gave up. So he walks India and then he gives up singles to the next 4 batters, and the game was tied at 3. Then in the second, Smyly gave up a single to Jose Barrero. Then TJ Friedel, I thought, had a great series, bunted to Smyly. And for no reason, I don't know if he saw a ghost or what, he threw it to first. There was no one covering, and that would lead to the Reds adding another run, and the Cubs were down 4-3. All right. That's not something you can't come back from at the Great American Ballpark. We've seen those type of games, right? In the fourth, Smyly gives up 2 quick outs, but gave up a triple. He hits Jonathan India with the pitch and walks Spencer Steer to load the bases until getting Will Myers to pop out and end the threat. So you could just kind of see him struggling and fighting the entire game. But luckily, the Cubs came fighting back in the 5th. Dansby Swanson, he has not cooled down at all. He singled, and Ian Happ doubled to put runners at second and third with no outs. Cody Bellinger popped out, but Trey Mancini grounded out, and it was enough to advance the runners, and the game was tied at 4. Patrick Wisdom, next batter up, got drilled in the wrist. Keep that in your mind. 94 miles per hour, flush on the wrist. Tough guy stays in the game. Eric Hosmer doubles, and the Cubs now lead 6-4. So, all right, Cubs have fought back. Everything's great, but that lead is not going to hold in that ballpark. Drew Smyly comes out in the 5th. He gives up a leadoff single to Tyler Stevenson. Kevin Newman flied out. Then Stuart Fairchild was hit by a pitch. Luis Maile popped out for the second out, and you're thinking maybe Smyly's going to get out of there. Nope, he gives up a 3-run blast to Jason Vossler, who came in as an injury sub, and that put the Reds back up 7-6. A lot of people were not happy David Ross let him come out for that 5th inning, much less, after he hits the batter and puts 2 guys on, lets him face another batter.
Right. I mean, the name of this episode is welly named David Ross and the Bunt. It could have been, why did Drew Smyly get to throw 90 pitches? I mean, that could have been another name for this episode. I don't mind him going back out in the 5th, Crawly. I have no problem with that. He's a veteran. He's a crafty kind of guy. But as soon as he gives up the leadoff single, that is it. 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 And then, he owned this guy and he owned that guy is what David Ross tried to say later on the next day. But, boy, that really chapped my ass.
For me, it was when he hit Stuart Fairchild, was hit by a pitch, right? So he gives up the single, then he gets the out, and you're like, okay. And then he hits the guy, and you're like, dude, okay, enough. Now you've just put the, tying run at home plate. So that's where it bothered me. So the Cubs are down 7-6, but then the most frustrating sequence of a very frustrating game happened in the top of the 7th inning. Cody Bellinger walks. Great. Trey Mancini reaches first on catcher's interference. So they kind of lucked out on that because, Mancini hit the ball and it would have been one out with Bellinger at second, but everybody's safe because of catcher's interference. You got runners at first and second. You're down 7-6. Then Patrick Wisdom, who had 2 home runs the game before, was asked to bunt on a day when you already got 13 runs and everybody's hitting the crap out of the ball. Okay. So that, Dustin, to me, luckily David Ross was on 670, the score. He was on with Bernstein and Holmes, and that's middays right after you guys. And Lawrence asked him straight up what was going on with that. And I'm glad he did. And we have a clip of that real quick right here.
Magic Wisdom bunt. What was that on him? Was that something that came from you? And what were the options in that situation as you saw them?
Yeah, I mean, that was on me. I made that decision as the first and second. He got hit in the wrist the time before. There was a lot of question marks within that. He was taking some swings in the cage the inning before. Felt like he was good enough to play. But we all know, actual game speed, contact, swings are a little bit different. So just being down there, got contact behind him and Hosmer and plenty of matchup stuff behind Wiz. Want to get those guys in the scoring position, second and third. Got to a 3-1 count, still an advantage count for Wiz, and just happened to not execute the bunt. We'll kind of never know how things play out until we get to that. Maybe he hits a 3-run homer if we let him swing away, or maybe he strikes out and we don't get anything. But I think it's like one of those. I'm got a lot of question marks about how he feels, trusting the feedback I'm getting from my trainers, and also trusting the feedback he's telling me of how he can perform.
Was there ever a point where you were thinking, you know what, maybe I need to go in a different direction and pinch hit for him?
Sure. But when it became, I had that batter ready. But when it was first and second, nobody out, the obvious play for me with the question marks and still wanting to have matchup behind him when they brought in San Martin, the easy play for me was to ask him to sacrifice. I knew he could do that. He is a good bunter. I know he didn't get it down, but he's a very fundamentally sound player, and they just didn't execute. But absolutely, I had a pinch hitter ready.
Well, Crawly, let me say this. I thought that was a really good explanation. I thought he explained it very well. I feel like he maybe listened to the trainers too much. The trainers told him, hey, he can't swing, but he can stay in there. He could probably lay down a bunt, and it won't hurt him. But the one thing he makes out, he went up there to bunt from the get-go. He wasn't bunting on 3-1, right? He was bunting from the start of the at-bat. So that's the part where I say, wait a minute, David. Like, you're acting like if I didn't watch the game that you had him decide to bunt at 3-1. No, that's not when you decided to have him bunt. You had him going up there bunting from the start. And maybe to your point about Mancini getting on first base because of catcher's interference and them kind of lucking into first and second and nobody out, I wonder if that played a role in the decision as well, because you had first and second and nobody out. I don't hate it. It just, and then the worst part was in the 9th inning, we're going to get to that later, Wisdom hits a single. So, he was able to swing, and that's the part that ends up bothering you later on. I think him singling in the 9th adds a little bit of gasoline on this fire, if you will.
I got a lot of questions about it, and I thought it was one of the worst decisions I've ever seen David Ross make, and I'll tell you why. We talked the other day about, sometimes depending on the situation, you want to bunt. If it's 35 degrees and the wind's blowing in at Wrigley Field and you're facing a stud pitcher, yeah, maybe bunt to advance the runner. But when you got a pitcher that's struggling and you got a guy that's hot and you got a 3-1 count, okay, maybe you did, Dustin. Maybe you did want to go up there and you wanted to bunt, right? When you get to 3-1, you take the bunt sign off. Take it off and let the guy swing. And if he can't swing, you should have somebody in there that can. If he's listening to the trainers and they're saying, well, he can't swing, but he can bunt, Then let me ask you a question. Why is Nick Madrigal on the team? Isn't he Mr. Contact?
Well, you heard him say though yes he is, to answer your first question, but you heard Ross say that he was saving guys for future matchups when they were going to go to the pen. That's what he was doing.
I'm looking at this and you know,
the bench is a problem, Crawly. I would like to get into this later on in the podcast. The roster construction right now, in my opinion, is a problem and something that needs to be discussed between the two of us. But let's stick to what we're focused in on right now, which is this particular at bat in this particular moment on Monday.
Wisdom, this was brought up by Cliff Floyd, who I thought is doing a great job in the post game with Cole Wright, who's been on the show. But here's the thing. Wisdom has bunted for a hit once in his career, and he has 2 sack bunts in his career. This is not a bunter, okay? Either way, what ends up happening is Wisdom bunts it straight to the pitcher. And Cliff brought it up like in the post game too, is that if you take a look where everybody was set up, there just wasn't any – the whole idea was just a bad idea in general, I just thought. And so Eric Hosmer, the next batter, struck out, right? And then you had a pinch hitter for Edwin Rios, catcher Luis Torrens. He walked to load the bases. And then Ross called on his last catcher, Jan Gomes, to pinch hit for the starting catcher, Tucker Barnhart, right? So Gomes strikes out to end the threat. And that, like I said, to me, that was just really, really frustrating all around.
Super frustrating, no doubt about it. I mean, it was a big topic of conversation on the Tuesday Mully and Haugh show. There's no doubt about that.
Cubs tried to rally one more time in the 9th with 2 outs. Patrick Wisdom singled. There he is. Apparently he can swing the bat. So he singles. Eric Hosmer singled to put the tying run at second. Madrigal is going to pinch run for Hosmer. And then Miles Mastrobuoni pinch hit for Luis Torrens. Mastrobuoni hit a line drive that had a 600 average on normal. When you talk about the speed and the angle, 6 out of 10 times that's going to be a single. And Jason Vossler, who had the big hit, ends up snagging it to end the game. I have no idea what was going on. I know Smiley was just bad. He lasted 4.2 innings. He gave up 9 hits, 7 runs, 6 earned, 2 walks, 3 Ks, and 1 home run. Keegan, we got to talk about. Keegan Thompson, he saved the bullpen by going 3.1 innings, giving up 1 hit, no walks, and 3 Ks. So when you look at Keegan Thompson, and I'm putting up this graphic from Marquee Sports, their Twitter, at Watch Marquee, last 20 relief appearances, 50.2 innings pitched, 57 Ks, 178 ERA. Not too shabby, Dustin.
No, not too shabby, and I would have liked him to have gotten 3 2/3 innings of work and brought him in a little earlier as I was going back. I mean, why would you take – we talked about this on the last podcast. A couple of things before we move on. You took Jamison Tyone out. You and I had a little bit of a disagreement. You said that, you know, he wasn't in good form, but he was at 60, low 60s. He was under 70 pitches when they took him out. So all of a sudden, you're going to let Drew Smiley go 90 because he's a crafty veteran? Wait a minute. You just paid Tyone to be a big-time guy, and all of a sudden you're going to pull him before 70 pitches? And then your point earlier, Madrigal, the guy who is on this team because he makes contact. Why is he pinch running? Couldn't Master Boney be the pinch runner? And couldn't Madrigal have been the guy, right? I mean, that's right. Just one right there. Like, and again, we can sit here and say, and I mean, I love the metric, Crawly. I laughed. I saw it on Twitter as well. You know, that the speed off the bat of Master Boney, 60 whatever, low 60% of the time, it goes for a hit. Well, guess what? It didn't go for a hit that night. Okay? And I don't think anybody would have said, oh my gosh, why would you not have Master Boney hit instead of Nicky, right? I just don't, Madrigal. I don't understand. That's another part of it that I didn't understand. Why would you have Nick Madrigal run instead of have Master Boney run and have Madrigal hit? But I'm sure there was a book. I'm sure there was a book that, you know, Master Boney was going to have a better shot at getting a hit than Madrigal was because of some book.
Master Boney's a lefty though, right? Left-handed hitter.
Right. Yep.
And so I think that's really kind of came down to that. But to me, right, when you, again, going back to that 7th inning, when you got 2 guys on and you need somebody, you're David Ross and you're saying bunt. He said, I put it on. So if you wanted to bunt, First of all, I mean, Nick Madrigal is way smaller than Patrick Wisdom. You give him a harder target to even try to hit in. Who knows? He might even walked. I just thought that was a huge mistake. And rather than David Ross giving some long mealy mouth answer, just say I screwed up. That's as simple as it goes, because that's what happened.
It was probably Ross's worst game, definitely this year, but the worst game I can remember.
Wasn't a good one. The Cubs offense did break out like we hoped, scoring 6 runs on 12 hits. Dansby Swanson 3 for 5, right? Eric Hosmer went 3 for 5 with his first 2 RBIs, and Cody Bellinger with his first home run for the Cubs. Overton was just as bad as Smiley, going 4 innings, giving up 8 hits, 5 runs, 1 walk, and 5 Ks. Kevin Newman, hello Newman, legendary Cubs killer, used to be with the Pirates. He went 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs and made some nice plays at shortstop. Jason Vossler was 1 for 3, but that 3 was the big 3-run home run to give the Reds the win, and he makes the game-ending catch.
Well, Crawly, that was one that I think the Cubs could have had, and that leads us into the game from last night, and it was kind of as early as we are in the season, it kind of made it a must-win statement game as far as I was concerned.
It sure felt like it. You had Hayden Wesniewski versus Luis Cessa, and once again, the Cubs come out swinging. Horner with a leadoff single. Swanson crushed one that was caught against the wall. A nice play by TJ Friendl, but that looked like it was going to be extra bases. Ian Happ singles. Cody Bellinger singles to load the bases. Mancini hits a rope that was caught by Will Myers, who threw home. Nico just under the tag. Just some great base running by that guy. Cubs up 1-0. Dustin, when I watched that slide, I was like, yes, we actually have a leadoff hitter. I'm excited about that.
No, he's been great in that spot so far this year.
Could Hayden do something that neither Tyone or Smiley could do in the last couple of starts and pitch a shutdown inning after the offense scored? The answer, sadly, was no. Jonathan India doubles to lead off the game. TJ Friedl was thrown out by Patrick Wisdom on a bunt attempt that moved him to third, so that was good. And then Jake Fraley singled to tie the game. The Reds took a lead on a TJ Friedl solo home run in the third, and then Vossler crushed one in the fourth, and the Cubs were down 3-1. And I'm just telling you, Dustin, that whole game was nothing but frustrating because the Cubs were hitting the ball all over the place, hard as hell, and they just weren't falling, man. And the BABIP gods were not in their favors. There was one play where their I think it was a right fielder, like climbed the wall like Spider-Man and made a play that was on a ball that was going to be foul. It was just unbelievable how the Cubs just could not catch a break.
Yeah, they weren't not catching any breaks early. You were watching it live. I was following it on my phone, and things just were not going our way in the beginning of that game.
But Patrick Wisdom came up in the 6th with 1 out and hit a double. Eric Hosmer, who loves, just like Ian Happ, loves hitting in Cincinnati, he singled, and the Cubs cut the lead to 3-2. And then the offense really blew up in the 7th inning. Hosmer leads off with a double. Swanson walks, Happ doubles, Bellinger walks, Mancini singled, Wisdom singled. Hosmer reached on an error. Gomes grounded into a double play. Well, great, thanks for that. Even Miles Mastrobuoni, your favorite, he singled and drove in a run. But when the dust settled, the Cubs scored 6 runs and had taken an 8-3 lead. The Cubs would add 3 more in the 8th and 1 in the 9th. And the Cubs scored 2 in the bottom of the 8th as the Cubs took game 2, 12-5. Wesniewski, I know you were pumped up, did not have the start we were looking for. He went 4.2 innings, giving up 6 hits, 3 runs, 2 walks, 4 Ks, 2 home runs. But hey, they were solo home runs, man. You know what they always say is that if you're going to give up some runs, make them, some home runs, make them of the solo variety. The bullpen of Rucker, Alzolay, Boxberger, and Merriweather looked solid. Alzolay went 2.2. He looked really good. He gave up 2 hits and 2 runs, but it was a 2-run home run by Stuart Fairchild. But he struck out 5 and 2.2. He gets the win, but I thought he looked really good again.
Yep, absolutely. He looked good. My biggest problem with my guy Hayden was the number 2, the 2 walks, 2 home runs. As you pointed out, they were solo home runs. He's a confident guy though, and I have faith that he'll be good again the next time out.
I think that's what people get frustrated with, is that it's early on and everything kind of feels magnified. These are guys, these are young players, and they're gonna have their ups and they're gonna have his downs, and I think that Hayden has the right mental makeup, in my opinion. When I heard some of the post-game stuff and him talking, he was, disappointed in his outing, but he was happy the team won, said all the right things. I'm definitely, like I said, it's early. I know people are freaking out and we got to put this guy up and this guy down. Let's just kind of just let this thing breathe a little bit. You know what I mean? I don't think I think it's very, very early to kind of freak out as much as I think people have been freaking out.
All right, then today's game, Crawly, we were supposed to see Marcus Stroman get the ball. It was going to be an 11:30 first pitch out at the Great American Ballpark, but weather and a tornado watch get in the way. The game's going to be made up in September, a day-night doubleheader out there in Cincinnati. So the pitching staff, everybody gets moved back a little bit, and the Cubs get Thursday off. Friday, they're going to take on the Rangers, and Stroman's going to get to throw in front of the home crowd once again.
Yeah, it's frustrating though because I think Cincinnati is a very beatable team, and you need these wins as much as you can stack them in the first half of the season. I'm less worried about the second half. So, to me, I was really frustrated they couldn't get it in.
Yeah, but I'm glad they didn't sit there all damn day, right? Like they got the day off tomorrow. Like if you're gonna get if it's not gonna happen, don't sit there until 4 or 5 o'clock and get that thing started. Get back to Wrigley at midnight or 1 a.m. and it really wrecks the day off for the team.
Yeah, it is what it is. But like I said, hopefully the offense continues the way it's been going.
You're listening to the Fly the W670 podcast, season 2, episode 25. David Ross and the bunt. In this segment, Crawly interviews Andy Martinez of Marquee Sports Network.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, we have beat writer for Marquee Sports Network, Andy Martinez. You've read his work. You've seen him on the Marquee Network. How you doing tonight, Andy?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Love seeing you and love reading your work. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on, other than, again, I like your work, is that you wrote an article a few days ago about the Cubs' long-term plans for Chris Morel. And I'm sure you're probably smiling a little bit here because, oh my God, is the drumbeat loud of fans that want Chris Morel up to Chicago. And it's easy to see why, right? He's a fun-loving, enjoyable guy.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, the clubhouse, the aura around the team is so much better when he's around. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's always smiling. He's always happy. He's always just exuberant when he's around. I've never not seen him smile. There's been even times, this sounds so weird, but there's even been times in the clubhouse after a loss where he'll at least give you a little smirk, like, "Hey, how's it going?" Which, is not too common amongst a lot of players. When they lose, a lot of players are upset, but Chris finds a way to give out a smile, even in tough times. So yeah, I mean, his presence is definitely missed at the big league level, but there's a reasoning for why they decided to option him down to Iowa to start the year.
Yeah, and you had a chance to talk to Jed Hoyer. What Jed have a chance? What did he say to you about why Chris Morel did not make the team?
Yeah, so the big thing that Jed mentioned, and David Ross mentioned it too, and I talked to a couple of people with the team too that also mentioned, it just comes down to playing time, right? It does no good if he's playing one day a week, maybe at right field. If he's pinch hitting 3 days later against a lefty, maybe even a tough lefty, that doesn't really benefit anyone, right? He has no chance to find his rhythm. I think it's easy to get almost blinded by his start when he first got up to the major leagues, where he was so good, and every time he was up there, it just seemed like he was going to get a hit. It seemed like every game he was going to go 2 for 4, 2 for 5 with a double or a home run. Like, it just seemed like he was just going to have a ton of success. But later on in the season, he really, really struggled, especially the last 2 months of the year. I believe he hit like around 183 over the last 2 years. The league figured him out. He was striking out a lot. There was a lot of weaknesses in his swing that teams found and exploited. And so the thing became, okay, he's got to figure these out and he's got to improve that. That's not a bad thing that he has those flaws. Every player comes up and has those flaws, unless you're, superstar, sort of like Juan Soto or someone like that. But we're not putting Christopher Morel and Juan Soto together yet in the same boat. But the thing with him is trying to figure out those swings, and he's not going to get that if he's playing every 5th day, every 6th day, once every other day, maybe one at bat every week. So for him and for the Cubs' long-term success, it made the most sense to option him down to Iowa, kind of play a little bit all over the field, kind of like he did with the Cubs last season, but more importantly, get those regular at-bats where he can figure out some of the things in his mechanics, some of the weaknesses in his game, and improve on that, so that there's going to be injuries, there's going to be poor performances that the Cubs have. When they do call upon him, they know that they're getting more closer to the player that they saw the first 2 months when he was at the big leagues compared to the player that they saw the last 2 months in the big leagues.
Yeah, I remember he had this on-base streak that was just like 24, 25 games. He hit the
Yeah.
home run in his first game and everyone gets excited. And then as you point out in the article, he slashes 163, 238, 340 with 62 strikeouts in 55 games, right? 50 starts. I mean, that's the thing, is that you kind of love him so much because of what you're talking about. I saw a spring training game this year where it was pouring. I think it was against the Reds, and he's literally signing autographs for all the people that are in the stand instead of running to the bus. But if people want him to be successful, especially in the long term, this is not a bad idea. And I think I don't know if you know who talked to Chris about it, but you mentioned in the article, there's a lot of players that were up and then had to go back down, right?
Right. That's the thing. The thing about the Cubs that almost gets in a way overlooked is just how they deepen their roster from top to bottom, pitching side and on the hitting side, that it kind of forced this move that Christopher Morel had to be optioned down at the beginning of the offseason. If you would have said Christopher Morel is going to start the season in Iowa, you would have thought, oh man, he had a really bad spring, or the Cubs signed all these different, like they signed all 4 shortstops or something like that they just required. Like, you didn't think that Christopher Morel going to Iowa at the start of the offseason was a real thing. But then as the move started happening, you're starting to do the quick math and the quick roster projections in your head, and you're like, all right, well, Trey Mancini, that like, he can play in the outfield and he can play first base, he can DH. All right, Eric Hosmer, he can play first base, he can DH. And you're starting to get all these additions. And I think especially when Edwin Rio signed, it kind of became a thing where it's like, okay, like, where's Christopher Morel going to fit? There's no logical fit on the roster outside of that super utility bench role, which is great. And he would have been the Cubs' natural backup at almost every position except for first base and catcher. But again, that doesn't help him, and it doesn't help the Cubs if he's not playing regularly.
And again, this has happened. Ian Happ, you remember how upset he was when he got called down, and you know what? He made the adjustments, and now he's an all-star. It's not like it can't happen.
Right.
People forget Kyle Schwarber was sent back down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is I talked to someone with the Cubs coaching staff, and they told me they talked to him and they said, hey, listen, this isn't the end of the world. Nico Horner was optioned in 2021 to start 2021. Look who he is now. Ian Happ, you mentioned him, Kyle Schwarber. Players get optioned. I don't want to say all the time, but they do get optioned, but it's not the end of the world, right? Like, players can come, you can get optioned, you can come back up, and the onus is on him to kind of prove to the Cubs that, hey, you made a mistake. Like, that those last 2 months of the season were a fluke. They weren't who I am. Like, this is who I am. That's the onus on him. And I know the first at bat or first game in Iowa, he hits a home run. So it's kind of like he's already pushing the envelope in a way. But that's the thing is the option. I think there's such a big deal about the opening day roster, and David Ross talked about this. Jed Hoyer talked about this, where guys try to, like, you want to be on the opening day roster, and you've been to opening day. I've been to opening day. Like, we know how special opening day is for sure. Like, there is the aura of being on at opening day. But the reality of the situation is someone like Christopher Morel, someone like Nelson Velasquez, guys like that are eventually going to work their way up in Chicago, just because, like I mentioned, there's going to be injuries that happen. There's going to be guys that struggle. There's going to be double headers where they need to call up someone. Like, there's so many things that happen throughout the course of a full 162 game season, that this isn't the end of the world for Christopher Morel or Cubs fans who love Christopher Morel. Like, Christopher Morel will be up in Chicago at some point this season.
Yeah, so it's funny. We actually went down. We went to opening day. It was my 23rd opening day that I went to, and then we woke up the next day on Friday and drove straight to Iowa to go see the Cubs, and they crushed the Columbus Clippers 11-5. But it was weird because I see Morel. He's on the field. He's playing catch, but there's almost part of you that kind of realize, like you said, opening day, 35, 36,000 people, sometimes 40, right, as opposed to Iowa, which is cold, and they were having the Final Four women's game, and it's not the same thing, man. But he put his head down. He went 2 for 4. He had 2 RBIs. I mean, looking good. But the main thing for him is cutting down on the strikeouts, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, is the strikeouts are the bugaboo, especially with the way that the Cubs offense is constructed, where it's okay if you have some strikeout with this Cubs lineup, because the natural trade-off when you have a lot of strikeouts is usually you have a lot of power. Christopher Morel wasn't having, in those last 2 months where he struggled, they only had 7 home runs, right? So the power wasn't offsetting the strikeouts. I think the guy we turn to all the time is Patrick Wisdom, right? The strikeout rate seems astronomically high, but the trade-off is you're going to get 25 to 30 home runs, which you'll take that. If the strikeout rate is, 30% or so, like, you'll take that. When you're in Christopher Morel's case, where you'll have to double check the numbers, but it was really, really high strikeout. I was higher than 30%, and the home run rate wasn't there. The trade-off doesn't make sense. So fixing the strikeouts and adding power, adding more contact, that will help him become a more well-rounded player and really benefit the Cubs, because as we've seen, the lineup isn't constructed as it was in the past, where it's you might have a chance to go 6 guys straight, hit a home run. Like, this lineup is constructed on single, double, base hit, knock, bloop, single. Like, just they're not going to be hitting a ton of home runs. So having the ability to not swing and miss is huge in this lineup, because that's how they're going to generate offense this year.
Now, I know there's so much value because Christopher, like you said, he can play all over the diamond. He can play infield. He can play outfield. But, when you look at the Cubs and where they kind of sit right now, I mean, honestly, like, I'd say out of all the spots where, okay, so we know up the middle is pretty solid,
Yeah.
Suzuki's going to be in right field. Happ is another question, but you got a bunch of guys down in Iowa and Tennessee banging on the door. Like, to me, I feel like third base is really a spot. Do you think that there's going to be a focus for Christopher to be playing third base, or do you think they're just going to continue to keep kind of moving him around and that's where his value is going to be?
I mean, I think there is value to moving him around. Jed Hoyer even mentioned someone like Chris Bryant, where he had a ton of value early on in his career, and even in his last season in Chicago, where they could play him at third base, they can play him at left field, they could play him at right field. He even played a little center field, and he can play first base. So, like, there's value in having guys that can do that, and Christopher Morel has shown that he can do that effectively, right? It's not like you're putting him out there and you're like, ooh, I don't know what we're going to get out of third base defense this week or this game because Christopher Morel's, like, you're going to get solid defense. You're going to get solid defense in at second base or shortstop or in the corner outfields. Center field's got to improve upon a little bit, but I think that'll come with more repetition. It was interesting because David Ross mentioned when I think it was right around opening day, maybe it was the second day of the season. I can't remember exactly when, but it was near the beginning of the season. He mentioned Christopher Morel and, like, what was the focus of playing time. And he mentioned, well, there's a lot of outfielders in Iowa. So, probably moving around the infield more. And I believe his first start was in the outfield in Iowa. So it's like, oh, okay. Like, he's still going to be moving around. Like, they're going to find places to move around. I think there is value in having that kind of player. We see it even at the big league level, where, like, all right, Trey Mancini, for example, he can play right field, he can play first base. Miles Mastroboni can play kind of all over the place, and they have value in there. Nick Madrigal now can play third base and second base. So the Cubs clearly value the ability to be able to have players that can move around. The other thing too is, like, late in games, if they're going after chasing a run, having someone that, okay, you can pinch hit and you can kind of move things around and still have a good defense is pretty valuable. So I think Christopher Morel, the long answer, yes, third base probably maybe makes the most sense. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of value for him and for the Cubs to be able to play all over and not pigeonhole him to one position.
And I think that there's just, like, a lot of Cubs angst over 5 games. You know what I mean? We haven't played a week worth of games, and the pitchforks are out and the torches are out for Miles Mastrobuoni, who, I know people were upset at that little bloop, but I mean, that was a really hard play when the wind's blowing in. It's like, oh, dive. You don't realize that, that ball's doing all sorts of tricks on you. It's really tricky. And there's no saying that Christopher Morel would have gotten that or not. It's give the guy a chance. And again, let Christopher Morel develop, because it is hard to, like you said, without consistent at bats. And think about this. Think about the pitchers that they faced that first series. When you're talking about Corbin Burns, when you're talking about Brandon Woodruff and Lauer and stuff like that, it's difficult to learn against those type of pitchers. Those are the best of the best.
Right. Yeah. Like, imagine they call him up and you're like, we think he can improve on his struggles. And then he faces Brandon Woodruff and strikes out, Corbin Burns and strikes out. It's like, okay, like, you probably didn't figure it out because he's facing two of the best hitters, or two of the best pitchers, in baseball. Like, it's better to have those flaws or work on those flaws, against AAA pitching, against pitching that he can control. Because the fact of the matter is, guys like Brandon Woodruff, guys like Eric Lauer, even had they faced Hunter Green in the series finale against Cincinnati, like, those guys aren't going to help you. Like, those are anomalies in the sense that, like, those are the tip top of the game. You're not going to learn anything by going up against them. To your point though, yeah, like the Miles Mastroboni play was an interesting one, because he mentioned after the game, like, that's a learning experience for him. And he thought that he thought it was going to drop further away from him than it actually did. If that makes sense. Like, he didn't think he could dive for it. He realized, like, after the fact, like, he could have dove for it and maybe had to play on it. But that's kind of like, you don't call up Christopher Morel for that one play, right? Like, you don't, say, oh, like that one play trades off the 5 strikeouts he would have had in that situation. Like that's not how it works. And clear, like, yes, it would have maybe helped them win that one game, but would it have helped them win multiple games, or would it have helped him improve his game in the long term? That's to be determined. And I think the Cubs are banking on the fact that in Iowa, while it theoretically, if you really want to really pretzel brain yourself around like that, Christopher Morel could have made that one play if he was available or on the bench or anything like that. Like, I don't know if that the trade-off is worth him striking out 5 times and not getting regular at bats.
Right. And how many games is it going to cost you if he can't perform offensively?
Right.
So yeah, there's a trade-off. Now, I did get to see you out in Arizona, which was awesome. When you were out there, what was the thing to you that kind of most stuck out when you kind of watched that team? And what were some things that impressed you the most from being out in Arizona?
So the big thing was defense, right? And we heard it all off season and all spring. It's like defense, defense, defense. And you're like, okay, like whatever. And I remember watching infield outfield drills on, I believe it was like the first day of full team workouts. And I'm like, wow, like that, okay, like that looks really good. But I'm also like, all right, let me tone it back. Like, it's infield outfield drills, like it's very controlled environment. There's nothing on the line, like it doesn't really mean anything. And then that one of the last few games of spring training where Dansby Swanson's making incredible play after incredible play, and Nico Horner's making nice plays. Like, it's like, okay, like that makes sense. And then you think about the pitching that they have, right? Someone like Marcus Stroman, where he's most successful if the ball's on the ground, if that sinker is working down and away on lefties and down against righties, like to put the ball in play. Having that defense with the shift, like all of this are so cliche, and I like almost hate myself for saying all these cliches, but it's so true. Like you have good defense that could field the ball and take away outs. That's really valuable. One of the things that I think the biggest takeaway from last season with the pitching was like the pitching was good at times, but the defense wasn't that great. And if you think about it, like if a pitcher makes a great play and you have average defense that doesn't convert that ground ball into an out, okay, that's an extra 5, 6, 7, 8 pitches to get another guy out. And if you do that even 2 times throughout the course of a game, that's like 15 to 20 pitches. That's theoretically an inning, right? So like instead of going 6 innings or 7 innings, now you're going 4 or 5 innings. Like, that doesn't benefit anyone, and it taxes your bullpen, which the bullpen was solid last year. But if you're having to turn to your bullpen in the 4th, 5th inning, like that's not good. This year, like the hope is, and we've seen it at times, especially those first 2 games with Steele and Stroman, like the defense will help and the pitching will work, that you can go deeper into games and you can kind of not have to burn your bullpen and have it catch up to you 2 or 3 days later.
Well, Andy, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Always love your work. Where would our listeners be able to find you on social media, and where would they be able to read your stuff?
Yeah, so you can read everything on MarqueeSportsNetwork.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at @amartinez_11.
All right, Andy, I hope to see you around the ballpark soon. Thank you for jumping on, and we'll see you again in the future, all right?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
This is Season 2, Episode 25 of the Fly the W670 podcast. We're calling this one David Ross and the Bunt. Don't forget to listen, download, review, most importantly, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. So after the latest series, the Cubs find themselves tied for last place with the Cardinals in the NL Central. A little bit of good news coming in, Crawly, on the injury front.
Yeah, it sounds like from what they're saying is that David Ross said that Suzuki took 4 at-bats on Tuesday as a DH in a simulation game. He said, this was a quote from David Ross, his oblique is about a 10 out of 10 right now. Says a major league rehab assignment couldn't be coming soon. And Dustin, it could not be soon enough, because you can just tell by the lineup how it just completely changes if you have Suzuki in there.
Oh, 100%. But I got it. This is okay. Let's get into the roster a little bit, since we're talking about Suzuki. Does Suzuki really need a rehab assignment? Does he need to go play with the Cubs? I mean, a 70% Seiya Suzuki has got to be better than a 100% Mastrobuoni. I just don't get it. I just don't understand. Or come on, call the kid up. Call our guy up from Iowa. Mastrobuoni has got all these. He started 4 games for the Cubs now. He's had 12 plate appearances. I mean, those could have all been for Christopher Morel. Christopher Morel's only had 3 games and 12 at-bats so far in Iowa at the time of this podcast.
Right. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of let this thing play out. I'm not going to freak out too much. I think that
Come on, Crawly, freak out with me.
There's a plan with Christopher Morel, and they want to see they want to see development, and it's just a lot harder to do that when you're facing Corbin Burns or when you're facing Brandon Woodruff, as opposed to being in the I-Cubs and just being able to kind of slow things down, not have to press. I think that Morel has a real good future with this team. And, you were asking me what position I think I kind of saw him playing. And now I keep thinking more and more third base is the way to go. So I think that I want to see him get more defensive reps at third. I want to see him get more bats at the minor league level. If you're saying you want somebody up, honestly, for right field, if you don't like Mastrobuoni, fine, that's fine in a short sample size. But I would say I would take Nelson Velasquez if you were asking me. Put someone in right field.
I am already ready for a roster adjustment. Something. I mean, Mastrobuoni's getting way too many at bats for me right now.
A couple more injury news right here. Lefty Brandon Hughes is going to throw off the mound today. He threw a session on Monday as well. He was on the IL with some left knee inflammation. He would have been the only lefty in the bullpen. So again, another guy that cannot come back soon enough. Some bad news for the Cubs. Right-handed pitcher Ben Leeper, who I was really excited about, posted on Instagram that he underwent Tommy John surgery and his 2023 season is done.
Yeah, not the best news, but I don't know how much the Cubs were expecting from him, at least at the major league level this year.
Right. It's just a guy I've been keeping my eye on, thinking that he's really, again, when you talk about guys that are going to come up and help immediately, I'm not saying Ben Leeper was one of them, but it's going to be these bullpen arms. So you just want to keep seeing those guys develop, the waves of talent, the waves of arms coming to Wrigley. Speaking of coming to Wrigley, the Cubs come back to Wrigley to face the Rangers. Let's take a look at the probable pitchers for the series. A reminder, Dustin, you're not going to be happy, but Friday's game will be on Apple TV. And as opposed to last season, there will be no freebies. You gotta subscribe if you want to get the game.
Gotta subscribe, huh?
Or you could listen to the game with Hall of Famer Pat Hughes and the Pat and Ron show and Ron Coomer on 670 The Score, which, you know what, a lot of times is a great option.
That's a great option. Great call, Crawly. And yeah, I was thinking about, it's Good Friday. I might go out for the game in the afternoon, but I wonder if the local watering hole will actually have that game on.
Absolutely. I would definitely give that a try and see what happens. But because of the rainout, Stroman will start the series for the Cubs. He was excellent last time out against the Brewers, going 6 innings, giving up 3 hits, 8 Ks, and 3 walks. This is going to be Marcus's 200th career start, so that's one heck of a milestone. I keep thinking the guy's 5'7", 5'8". He's my height. And, I got to interview him before, and he's an interesting character, man, but height doesn't measure heart, and you could say that about Stroman. So congratulations to Marcus on that. Absolutely phenomenal. But get this, Dustin, in his last 8 starts, dating back to August 30th of last year, remember he had all sorts of issues kind of when he was coming out of camp and had some injuries. Stroman has pitched to a 1.88 ERA. 10 earned runs in 48 innings pitched, and he's walked 12 and struck out 43 batters. So he has been hot lately.
Oh, come on. It's hot. He's been super red hot.
Nathan Eovaldi will be with the Rangers. Eovaldi was with the Red Sox last season before signing with Texas in free agency. Last season for the Red Sox, he went 6-3 with a 3.87 ERA starting 20th game. He's pitched 1 game for Texas versus the Phillies. He got a win by going 5 innings pitched, giving up 6 hits, 3 earned runs, 2 walks, and 6 Ks. We can take a look at the Cubs and how they've done off of Eovaldi, and you can kind of see here, Yan Gomes, ooh, look at that, 11 at-bats. He's got a 5.45. That's not a bad sample size. Trey Mancini, you might want to sit him down, 18 at-bats, 167. Hosmer, 571 at 7 at-bats. So just kind of something to kind of take a look at.
Yeah, I think you're going to get Mancini probably could use a day off his feet. I mean, I guess he got today. He got Wednesday, and he's going to get Thursday off. But he could use a day. I don't want to see him in right field unless it's a necessity. By the way,
I don't mind with that either. I would rather have Patrick Wisdom out there, to be honest. But in Game 2 of the series, Justin Steele will take on Martin Perez. We all remember Justin Steele's last start against the Brewers. After a shaky first inning, he locked on down. He went 6 innings pitched, gave up 3 hits, no runs, 1 walk, and 8 Ks. Unfortunately, he did not get the win because Assad blew the game on that one. Only one player on the Rangers has ever faced steal. That's left fielder Robbie Grossman, and he is 0 for 1. So for the Rangers, it's going to be, everyone's going to be pretty much seeing Justin Steele for the first time. So I'm hoping the Cubs can take advantage of that.
Absolutely. I would love that. And I think the third game, Crawly, I think is a really, really important start for Jameson Taillon.
Yeah. Now, but in game 2, we do have Martin Perez. He's a 32-year-old lefty who's played for the Rangers for most of his career. Started 32 games last season for Texas, 12-8 record with a 2.89 ERA. In the one start this season, he got a win in a 16-3 drubbing of the Phillies, going 5.2 and giving up 8 hits and 1 run while walking 3 and striking out 7. So that was a blowout. But like you said, game 3 is going to feature Jameson Taillon, and that's his second start for the Cubs versus Jon Gray. Obviously, like you said, the first start wasn't what Jameson wanted. He struggled versus the Brewers, going 4 innings pitched, giving up 7 hits, 3 ones, 1 walk, and only 2 Ks. He just wasn't crisp. He just didn't have it that day. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do when that happens. You try to do the best that you can, but we saw him strike out a lot of guys in spring training. He looked really good, so hopefully that continues. When you take a look at the Rangers, they have some guys that have seen him before. Corey Seager's someone you're going to have to look at. He's hitting .444 against Jameson Taillon, so just kind of be aware of that one. So may want to be very careful on how he pitches that one. For the Rangers, you have Jon Gray. Cub fans are familiar with him. He spent most of his career in Colorado, pitching 7 seasons for the Rockies. He signed with the Rangers last season, went 7-7 with a 3.96 ERA in 24 games. He lost his first start of the year against the Orioles, but it wasn't his fault. He pitched 6.1 innings. He gave up 4 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, and 7 Ks. So, Jon Gray's been around a little while, and so he knows how to pitch. So I wouldn't assume that this is just going to be a walk in the park. But if we do a temperature check really quick, Dustin, 3 games against the Rangers, we've kind of heard the matchups. What are you thinking as far as what you want to see? I mean, you got your 1, 2, 3 starters, This is what you want going into a weekend.
You can't get swept, number one. You can't get swept. You're back at home. As you just mentioned, you've got your 1, 2, 3. You're going to get one for sure. You're going to get one. It's probably Saturday. That's probably the one you're going to get. But I'm hoping for 2 out of 3, and I don't want any blowouts.
Right, and you're taking a look. The Rangers are 4-2, right? So they've gotten off to a really good start. I think that the Justin Steele and the Texas hitters not ever seeing him is going to be an advantage for the Cubs. So I think you can definitely take one there. I'm just hoping that Taillon has a much better start and Stroman keeps doing what he's doing and the Cubs can take 2 out of 3.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed, Crawly. Hey, Crawly, you got a big event coming up Thursday with Club 400, right?
Yep, there are still tickets available, but very limited at this point now. You got Justin Steele coming tomorrow, and one thing that is cool is that originally he was going to have to pitch the next day. Now he doesn't have to pitch till Saturday, so hopefully he can stay out a little bit later and have a good time with you. But if you're interested, go to the Club 400 website, or you can contact me on Twitter at Crawly's Cubs. And we'd love to see people at Club 400, and you'll get all you can eat, all you can drink, question and answer with Justin Steele. You could get to take a picture with them, and you get 1 item autograph. So you're not going to find a better deal. Plus the proceeds go to charity. So love to see everybody out there, and you get to see one of the most exciting young pitchers in the game, in my opinion.
Well, Crawly, have a great time at that. Have a great weekend. Let's hope our Cubs can have a great Easter weekend out at Wrigley Field. That's a wrap. Season 2, episode 25. David Ross and the Bunt is in the books. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow us on all the socials, and, of course, email us, flythew670@gmail.com. You can now watch us on YouTube by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. Crawly, happy rest of your weekend. Enjoy your night tomorrow night. And as you and I like to say, go Cubs.
Go Cubs!